watching Daybreak on Arise News. Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in Arise analyst Constance Ikwoku.
Good morning, Adesua. Welcome back to Abuja. How was your weekend?
It was full of work.
I know, very busy. Charles and Yolanda, you were working as well. Yolanda was working.
Constance.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Well,
Thank
to
you.
look at the papers with us this morning, we have Dr. Iyobosa Owogarian. He is the editor, Nation's Capital of This Day. And then we'll begin with his paper, the paper that he edits. In This Day this morning, Bagudu, tax reform targeted at stimulating economic activities, employment generation, others. Atiku Bagudu is the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning. He said President Bola Tinubu is desirous of equity across Nigeria and that no legislation is designed to negatively affect any part of the country. Bagudu holds a critical portfolio in this government, and it's incisive that he's speaking out because it comes from a part of the country that currently strongly believes that this is all designed to undermine them. Dr. Owogarian.
Absolutely, you are right. It is expected because of the radical change and that the tax reform bill, is trying to solve. So it's generating controversy from different parts of the country. People are expressing their own perspective. Some people are opposing it for various reasons, But one thing that I'm very happy about, in the last few days, the federal government, has taken that bold step to educate the people, especially the people from the northern part of the country. During the week, the Minister of Information and his group were in Kaduna for a town hall meeting. And at that meeting, many stakeholders from the northern part of the country, religious leaders were invited. And I'm sure at the end of the day, they were better informed about the purpose of the bill. Of course, in democracy, you expect this kind of different perspective. But one thing I'm worrying about is the fact that the debate or the conversation is taking a very dangerous dimension. Some people, especially Islamic scholars, are trying to insinuate that the bill is targeting Muslims. They are introducing ethnic and religious dimension to it. I think that shouldn't be the case because once you are doing that, you are further dividing the country along religious and ethnic line, because we already have political tensions in the country. So it would be unhelpful to continue to use the tax reform bill to add to that political tension.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sure that the federal government is doing everything possible, to engage more stakeholders, let them know the import of that tax reform. I've read it, some part of it, but I think, like I keep on saying, the advantages outweigh the disadvantage. If there are areas of disagreement, there's ongoing process at the National Assembly. So those who are opposed to it can come up with their own perspective and see how they can tweak that section of the reform that they are opposed to. But in all, I think the bill or the reform bill is in the interest of the country.
Charles, when you listen to Mr. Atiku Bagudu, he talks about people resorting to sentiments that will weaken the federation. He talked about ethnic, he talked about religious sentiments that are not good for us. But when you also look at this, it's a trick from the playbook of politicians in this country, especially when things do not seem to go their way. And this kind of sentiments usually rally people quickly against whatever is the perceived injustice against them.
You're absolutely correct. Not just about this tax bills alone, but yes, across the board. And it's not just restricted to a region thing. Individual politicians, particularly in the northern parts of the country, are very, very quick to rally religious, ethnic, and all kinds of sentiments, especially when they think they are on the back foot. So maybe ahead of elections, it's a trick they always use. But, this time around, the minister, to quote him, says, "We can debate about argument, but what is wrong with us, given the great effort to put our economy in the right direction, is to be swayed by arguments of tribalism, religion, and sentiments." Absolutely correct, and it's a particular trick that's being used over and over and over again. When the tax reforms bills first came up and those northern senators were kicking against it, you know, analysts said, why don't you go and sit down and thoroughly read and properly analyze these bills before you start kicking against it? You just hear just part of the story, and then, you know, you're trying to whip up ethnic and regional sentiments. It's just not right at all.
Okay, let's look at The Guardian. States eye 180% hike in VAT earnings amid push for fiscal federalism. We are being told that the goal of this tax reform is to create a system that works for everyone. The government wants to deal with widespread tax evasion, poor compliance, and correct an inefficient system. At the same time, fiscal federalism comes up here, and states want to also make money. It means life is going to get more expensive. It means the taxman is at your door at this one.
Yes, the taxman is at your door, but you know, I have to quickly just disagree with what Charles said earlier about it being northern politicians who like to particularly lean on ethnic or religious sentiments. I believe it's every politician in Nigeria.
Did he say it was northern?
He said particularly northern. He said particularly in the north, and I have to push back on that particularly in the north, because I think it's a particular characteristic of politicians across board in any geopolitical zone. But on tax, you know, this VAT and the pushback, again, like I also believe that a lot of the governors or the political leaders we're seeing are fighting for themselves and not for the people. And we're seeing that from the numbers coming out and saying that these tax numbers are different. It says that in 2024, of the VAT that Lagos State contributed, they only received about 17% of that number back. However, a state like Imo State received over 1,700% higher allocation than the VAT they put into the pool.
Wow.
And you have states like Kano and Kaduna receiving about 100% to 300% higher than what they put into the pool. And so when you look at the actual numbers, you have to wonder, why are the politicians pushing back? Now, there is something to be said that VAT is a retrogressive tax. That means that the poorer you are, the more of your income is going to have to go towards paying that tax. Because if you earn 100,000 versus 10,000, paying 5 naira in tax means differently to you. So there is something to be said about the fact that VAT is a retrogressive tax, and in an economic climate as we are, with the inflation that we have, it is something that needs to be done very, very carefully, because we don't want to increase inflation.
All right, let's look at Daily Sun. Fear mounts over tougher economic challenges in 2025. 32 states failed to attract foreign investments. 4 states, FCT, they have been able to attract $7.23 billion in FDIs. Manufacturers are also eyeing a new tax law. This story talks about inability of the local industries to fill the void created by global giants that have been leaving the country over the past few years. I mean, these fears are real. What with inflation, you know, surging inflation actually, labor shortages and low consumer spending, you know, debt and poverty levels increasing. So it's end of the year and people are already thinking about what is 2024 going to bring us, Dr. Iwogaren.
Well, on a lighter note, what can be tougher than the current situation that we find ourselves today? But I agree with the headline, the Sun. It's going to be very tough, especially as we approach the festive period. The purchasing power is very low. It's likely that many people might not be able to travel because of the state of the economy and other things. Yes, you talk about many companies, especially multinational, leaving the country. And the question is to ask yourself, why are they leaving the country? It is not because we don't have the population. It is not because we don't have the market. Nigerians will have the market because of the huge population of Nigeria. But the reason why most companies are leaving Nigeria is because of the very harsh economic environment that we find ourselves. The cost of doing business is very high. And part of the problem they also complain about is these multiple taxations that we have across the country. And I think that is exactly what the tax reform is trying to address. You ask so many countries, I mean, so many multinational companies leaving Nigeria, and not just back to their country, but going to the neighboring country like Ghana, Angola, and what have you. And the question that you ask yourself, Why are they doing that? Is it because those countries have the market, or they have the population, or they have the more purchasing power? The answer is no. The reason why they are leaving is because of the inconsistencies in our policies, the multiple taxations that they are forced to, grapple with. So once we have the right economic environment, once we have the right political leaderships, and once we're able to reform these tasks that we are talking about, I think it will attract more foreign investors. Most companies will be forced to do business in Nigeria here, rather than going to Ghana or Angola, that's also facing a very similar economic challenges.
All right. New Telegraph, defections. APC decimates opposition ahead of 2027. Ruling party accused of wooing opponents with a return ticket. More PDP, LP, NAS members planning to dump parties. I think this leads us, or actually lands us back to the discussion about the winner-takes-all political system that we practice in Nigeria is destructive, and this is one of the reasons why people have to jump to the ruling party, and it's not sustainable, Charles.
Well, I think it's a case of the chickens coming to roost. It was this climate that prevailed when the PDP was in power, and they used to boast that they are the biggest political party in Africa. It took, the intervention of some of these dissatisfied politicians within the PDP to join forces with the other political interests that now became the APC. So we have, another evolution of, what used to be PDP now manifesting in the APC, where, you have the winner absolutely taking all. And this time around, I think it has become even more ruthless. We can take our example from the last presidential election, how it was so really, really very keen. But of course, it was the ruling party at the end of the day. So for the, the smaller stakeholders, the safe landing pad for them would be to go under the umbrella, pardon the pun, of the APC to find safety in numbers ahead of. So I think they're just playing smart this time around. But I mean, something would probably just happen, and we'll also have another party evolving that might just challenge the dominance of the APC. I pray so.
That's why when you look at the elections that are coming, some say it's still some way to go. However, it's difficult to see why or how the APC will not take over in a climate where we've not reformed the electoral system and the justice system. That's going to be a problem, or will pose a problem for us.
Definitely, especially coming off the back of the Edo State elections, the allegations that we're seeing in Edo State about INEC's participation or otherwise in an illegal system there, not even from non-state actors, but from the Electoral Commission itself. I think that's very frightening, the allegations that have been put on INEC by Osita Chidoka, by different CSOs, and we'll see what happens in court in Edo State. But we do need reform there. I was reporting on what happened in the House of Reps, where you had 4 members of the Labour Party move to the APC, and you had one there who moved from the PDP to the APC. And the thing that we're seeing now is this is the problem, is that people are actually focused on retaining political power for themselves rather than actual governance. We are still in 2024, and we are speaking about 2027 elections, because politicians are more focused on their own personal gains and their own personal political power than they are on governing and representing their people. And our judicial system needs reform, because our laws, technically by our laws, like the minority whip said on the floor, if you abscond, if you leave from one party to another, you have vacated your seat, because the seat should belong to a party and not to an individual. But we haven't seen that.
Let's look at other. Hold on, Charles. Hold on, Charles,
needs
please.
To be independent.
Hold on, Charles. Please, let's look at other papers briefly. The Punch newspaper. Lakurawa, Nigeria neighbors begin offensive against new terror group. Then we also have Syrian rebels oust Assad, end 60-year family rule. Let's look at Daily Independent this morning. Bleak Christmas as banks hoard cash. Nothing will stop us from investigating Airpeace FCCPC. Serap asked Akpabio Abbas to match human rights with tax reform. Telco subscribers set benchmark for new tariff regime review. We also have Punch newspaper. No, we've already seen Punch. Let's look at Vanguard newspaper. How non-appointment of ambassadors is hurting Nigeria, according to envoys. Any threat to Nigeria's security, internal or external, will face justice, according to the NSA. Marketers may lift petrol from Port Harcourt refinery this week. Why Naira is in massive recovery race across all markets by bankers. Also, let's look at the international headlines. Daily Graphic. Mahama makes comeback. Vice President Bawumia concedes defeat. Former President John Dramani Mahama has won the presidential election in Ghana. The people have voted for change, Bawumia was quoted as saying. This election came amid a high cost of living crisis and the country being unable to pay off its debt. What a stunning turn of events right there. Mahama won 56% of the votes to Bawumia's 41%. Ghana has voted. No court cases, no electoral fraud, elections, and defeat has been considered, Yolanda.
Well, yes. Shall we call this the presidential comeback season? Because first we had Trump and now we have John Mahama back in power. So the question on my mind right now is, will this comeback come with significant changes, with the changes that Ghana needs? Or will it just be a repeat of what has been going on in his 10-year plus, 12 years since he was in power?
Well, let's see. That's a big question. Citizen newspaper. SA key drug transit point, according to this paper. The crime is an international crime and it's organized and very profitable, we're told. Cocaine is shipped into West Africa from South America and heroin shipped into East and Southern Africa from Asia, headed to markets in Europe and North America. This follows dramatic increases in US and European demand for cocaine, cannabis, and other drugs. Dr. Yebosa, I mean, where there is demand, there is supply, but this is disturbing news.
Absolutely, I agree with you. South Africa has been a transit country for drugs, and that is why you see many of the drug barons, reside in South Africa. And sometimes they also, from there, you also find some of the moving these drugs to Nigeria. But I think in the last few years, under the leadership of Bubu Amawa, he's done a lot of job in trying to stem this flow of drugs into the country. So many of the barons have been arrested, and I'm aware that some of them are also being prosecuted in court of law. I think what we need to do, like you rightly say, is a well-organized crime. There are some powerful forces who are behind it, and they have a network, across the globe. And for you to be able to smash that network, you need a very sophisticated, intelligent agencies to also, smash that link. Like I said, NDLA in Nigeria is doing a very good job. So they need more collaboration with other agencies around the world, to be able to monitor this drug business we are talking about. Because what matters to us in Nigeria is that we are able to protect our country, we are able to protect our territory from these illegal activities of drug barons.
All right, Daily Express. Delight in Syria as rebels force Assad to flee to Russia. Joy erupted in Syria as President Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow. After rebel militias ended his 24-year rule, thousands poured into the streets shouting, "Assad is gone," as the army collapsed and the former president begged his ally Russia for asylum. Yolanda, another extraordinary chain of events happening around the world, in Syria in particular this time around. The question is, will this maybe lead to another Libya, total chaos, different militias fighting for control of the capital and other parts of the country? It's going to be uncertain.
Absolutely. It's strange that you should say that, because I was thinking that this feels a lot like Libya. But many Syrians have disliked Assad, you know, because of his authoritarian rule, being seen as a dictator, and with all the human rights violations, the torture, the detention, the chemical warfare, the economic hardship, you know, the list goes on and on and on. But yes, it does feel a lot like Libya, but hopefully with a much different outcome.
I mean, Dr. Yubosa, do you want to come in here? I mean, Assad was in power for 50 years, or his family has been in power for 50 years. So
Yeah,
I think that, you know, people kind of have said it is time to go. But it's going to be a lot of problem for that country.
Yeah, it's something Syria need to celebrate. But because ISIS is not without a huge casualties. You remember the civil wars that have been happening in that country. So many lives were lost, you know, and the country were destroyed. And today, the country is in turmoil. So I'm not surprised that the people of Syria are celebrating the exit of that dictator, you know. Apart from being in power for 13 years, his family had been in power for close to about 60 years? 50 years, yes, if I remember.
Well over 50.
So, and it was as if the government was meant for their family. And that is why in that country, even the neighboring country, you have, you know, people in that countries, you know, trying to survive. If you go to Turkey, you see so many of people of Syria living in that country because as a result of the civil war. So I was not surprised when Turkey rallied around the rebel in ensuring that this dictator was chased out of power just over about 2 days ago. So it's something that the people of Syria need to celebrate.
Well, that's it for the
paper. New regime to take over and govern Syria effectively.
All right, that's it for the paper review this morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Wogarian, for joining us.
Well, that is all we have for you today on Daybreak. It's goodbye from me. I'm Adesua Giwa Osage.
Thank you so much, Constance. Please do keep it here on Arise News. I'm Charles Zeruka.
And I'm Yolanda Roberts. The morning show is next. Stay tuned.